what's the magic instruction?
Okay. So on here, if you pull up the agenda and then hit the meeting media tab to use as your video instead of doing Zoom, it won't have noise.
Okay, I'm gonna have to go backwards a little bit then. That's different. Okay, so I'm starting from where?
The agenda
I mean, on the city website.
on the city website, yeah.
Okay.
So, not in email, but on the internet. So yeah, and then
Package tracking, I don't need it right now.
and then instead of and then just do like Charlottesville. Wait, I'm gonna spell it correctly. And then if you get to and so then if you pull that up and hit the meeting media.
No, I didn't even know that was there.
It's there for our meetings, but not for every single one.
Okay.
And then that won't have sound.
Okay.
It already doesn't have sound, but you can double
Yeah.
mute it just
Cool.
to.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Sam, are you ready, sir?
Yes.
Madam Clerk? Hello, I call the Charlottesville December 2nd, 2024 City Council meeting to order. Ms. Thomas, will you please call the roll?
Councilor Oshrin,
Here.
Councilor Payne,
Here.
Vice Mayor Pinkston,
Here.
Councilor Snook,
Here?
Mayor Wade.
Here. Okay. Is there a motion to approve or amend the agenda?
I move for approval of the agenda.
I'll second it.
Second? Okay, can we vote on it? Okay. The motion passes 5-0. This meeting will be divided into 3 sections. The first one is a work session to hear and discuss presentations that do not require a council vote. The second will be followed by a closed session, and then the city council will have its regular business meeting at 6:30. And today we'll be getting a budget briefing on housing and infrastructure.
Good afternoon. Back with budget brief number 2 of 3. So you only have one more of these to endure with me as I walk you through part of the ongoing considerations of what the budget team is currently, I'll say, faced with in hearing the many different items that are coming up through budget requests, expenses that we are already aware of, as well as increased costs that we're beginning to see across the city with just basic operational costs. So again, this is an opportunity for us to just share with you the trends that we're seeing that are impacting the budget, highlight what the fiscal demands appear to be, identify those drivers. When I present the actual budget to you all in March, I will lead with what I see as the fiscal drivers, pointing those out to you. And then the goal is to confirm that your priorities are captured in what we produce in the form of a proposed budget. This being housing and infrastructure, this time the next one will be public safety and transportation, and they are going to be a doozy. Again, looking at the process, we are still in budget submission, in budget review. Budget submissions have concluded. We probably have about 2 weeks left of budget presentations by departments and offices. We will wrap that up, and that does include a preview conversation that was added to the schedule for December 19th, where you will jointly meet with the school board and superintendent and hear from them a preview to what their challenges that they are anticipating and or opportunities for their new budget season, so that we then can get a chance to begin considering those matters as well. On the making decisions side, we have presented the CIP to the Planning Commission. That happened last week. The budget, the public hearing is scheduled for next week. That'll be an opportunity for the public to weigh in on what they understand is being proposed, and I'm, again, reminding everyone that that CIP is a draft. There's still work to be done in regards to what else may be needing to be added, and therefore it could lead to adjustments in what has been laid out there, but it is a draft at this time. I have my budget forum with the public on December 12th, and that'll be the chance for the public to come in and in that moment have conversation with me and the deputies and other staff members as to what some of the public considerations are for the budget, and then I will bring a proposed balanced budget on March 4th. So looking at housing, one of the two big things, of course, that I wanted to be able to touch on in this, and this is meant to be high level, so the goal is to not go too deep. The consideration of incentives, because that is where a lot of our energy has been focused on. How do we spur additional investment? The two items that are on the list for a continued work on our part is the land bank. You all are aware that previously there was $500,000 set aside for the land bank. That $500,000 was used in the acquisition of the Carlton Mobile Home Park. So at this time, there is no money dedicated to the land bank as it stands today. We haven't brought forward an ordinance yet. The intention is to continue to do that work, but I'm pointing that out to you that without any money, then all we'll have is an ordinance. We won't have any money to do anything with. So that is an item that I do have on the list for us to consider, and you will see that I'm hoping that I'll be able to come back to you in one form or fashion with some identification of at least the $500,000 that we have previously approved. The tax abatement program is an additional incentive that is high on the list. Mr. Williams has referred to the, I'm going to test myself, Housing Equity and Anti-Displacement Toolkit, HEAT, as where his focus is on tracking the investments, which we'll talk about next, but also to look at additional incentives that are, again, meant to spur investment. The tax abatement program is one that we've heard a lot about. We have heard it from different people suggesting that it should be a priority for us to consider. I labeled it to be determined because it's an expensive venture, and it's one that requires some study. So we are doing some work on that now, and the goal would be to determine if there is something that we might be able to put in the budget at this time, and if not, then I would share that with you as an opportunity for a future budget. And then affordable housing investment, so we'll talk a little bit about that. So I just went through all of this. The land bank, so that ordinance work, Deputy Freeze just met with the HAC as the ongoing work in regards to the ordinance. Our goal would be to finalize those discussions and to make a decision on when we bring something to council to adopt in the form of an ordinance or any further conversations that we want to have about that. So that work continues. And as I mentioned, the tax abatement program is probably at the top of the list of the toolkit items that we are currently considering. Under affordable housing investment, I'm just using this one slide at this time to just give you an indication of where we are in your commitment and realizing that commitment. Council in the adoption or the endorsement of an affordable housing plan identified that over 10 years you wanted to make a $100 million investment into affordable housing. To date, $35 million. Over $35 million has been identified. We're still finishing up the work on that and would have a presentation that we would make has now become an annual event in April. So Mr. Williams will come and present that to you in April, and it'll be a very robust presentation of the images that you need to see and how we are achieving and climbing the ladder towards meeting these particular commitment items.
Sam, I'm
Yes.
sorry, sir. Did you want us to ask questions as you go along?
You can, yeah.
So I think it's 2 slides back where you talked about the tax abatement
Yes.
program, and when you mentioned that, the name of that, I'm not going to ask.
The HEAT, yes, Housing Equity Anti-Displacement
Yeah.
Toolkit. I can remember
And
that.
so I know that we're going to specifically dive into 1 or 2 neighborhoods next year, if I recall, as far as studying those neighborhoods.
Yeah, that's through our small area planning process.
Yes. So I wonder if, as a result of that, that may have an impact on how we want to distribute money, either more or less. I'm just.
Yeah, I don't know that there's a way for us to say right now, really, there's no recommendation that we're ready to bring forward yet.
Right.
there could be a pilot, so the tax abatement could be a pilot because it is going to be an expensive venture, so therefore figuring out a way to afford
Just have
some component might be an approach. We haven't talked about that. They have not brought me anything yet.
Right.
So I'm only speaking, they probably don't want me to talk about it like I am, but I have not really spent a great deal of time looking at it other than what I know that we have done. We did tax abatement work with Friendship Court, so I'm aware of how that has gone for the first two phases. This would be really adopting a full-scale program of some kind and defining parameters, and the parameters, of course, are what I'm most interested in.
This is a placeholder type of thing?
Yeah, and the question is there a need for us to identify a budgetary amount to make something go live in FY '26? If we're ready, and by the time the budget is finished, is it something that we can afford to squeak in there? Or is that just a placeholder for
Right.
it becomes a priority for next time?
So this is something above and beyond what Commissioner Divers is already doing
Yes, this is tax abatement direct to the developers,
to the developer?
yes. Whereas Divers is focusing on individual
All right, thank you.
households.
That was my question, was this focusing on people who are?
No, it's just on the
real estate
developer side.
taxes or developers?
Yeah,
Okay.
this is really about spurring that continued momentum in the production of housing and preservation.
Great, thank you.
Okay. So again, the investment to date is over 35 million. This current year's CIP, or current year investment, is 12 million, and we're projecting in the FY '26 to '30 CIP an additional 52 million. So if you add all that up, that's $99 million in less than 10 years. That's pretty good. That's really what I wanted to say to you. In that moment, there's always going to be other things as it relates to how we're trying to make these things fit into the budget. When we get to this number, then it becomes something of a question of, and what do I take over affordable housing when something else is coming and there's not enough room? So this is all a part of that exercise.
So, I'm sorry, before you
Yep.
move on, so, will this give us some flexibility to pivot if we need to, things like, like we were able to pivot to address Carlton, and there may be other, developments that's coming up in the future that we may be asked to participate in.
I would say this slide does not give you the ability to pivot because this slide is telling you what you've already committed to. These are decisions made virtually.
Right, this one, okay,
Yes.
yeah.
So what it then becomes is a question of how much more can you do you want to do, and/or will you do? And I think those are going to be case by case as things come up, and then we also have to figure out some of the answers to some of the questions that you all have posed in regards to what information we need to bring to you. The city housing portfolio that we have in partnership with the Housing Authority, what is the plan for it? I've heard that before. The fact that we have housing units that are going to come out of the low-income housing tax credit protection of them being affordable. What do you want to do in those moments? Those are legitimate questions, and at some point, we're going to have answers for you. In doing this work here to determine where we are in the achievement of the goal or commitment that you set, I'm saying that you have hit it or pretty close to hitting it, and then it becomes a question of, and how much further do we go? Those are going to probably be case-by-case situations until we can bring more of that information to you. But that is the work that we continue to do. Infrastructure. There's a lot of infrastructure needs across the city. The three that I highlight for you just in this particular skim of subject area is Parks Master Plan, because we haven't had one, comprehensive. Citywide improvements, because there's so many different things that have made the list and continue to be added to the list, and internal operations, and that's just the cost of doing business. So when I look at the Parks Master Plan and how we've had the conversation about how do we implement that plan, aside from having the plan, the first thing you have to do is then put some money behind it. How do you implement the plan? We have $500,000 already identified within what I shared with you in that last presentation that is a part of the ADA transition plan. It was $2 million a year that was identified for the ADA transition plan, of which $500 is earmarked for park-specific projects. So I start there as priority identification. We know that the Riverview parking lot and restrooms at that particular park are still in need of resources, so we're working on that. And the Meadow Creek Trail, which I think is going to continue to stress all of us until it is finished, is still a budget challenge. Sections 1 and 2 we've been able to accumulate the funds and know through resubmitting those for cost estimates that the funds are there, and we expect that those 2 projects will move in 2025. Phase 3, which is the connection from the park to Mickey Drive, is not funded fully. We are expecting to have an updated scope and estimate in March that will tell us what the new cost is going to be. So today I am saying there's a gap, and I don't know what that gap is. I'm pushing the team to help me figure out an estimated number so that at least we can consider something. My fear is that we're probably going to find ourselves faced with an inability for that 3rd phase to move at the same time unless we put a considerable amount of money aside, and at this moment I don't see it. So those are 3 specific areas in parks, and that is before you get the parks master plan, and that is before we take any real look at what the consultant has recommended that we do. So that's a bit challenging to accept as well, because we know that they're going to have a list of things that need to be done, and I don't think they are numbers 1, 2, or 3 on this list. So there's going to be a need for other money to be set aside for parks. So then that becomes the question of, is it Meadow Creek Trail Phase 3 that gets it, or is it just the beginning of the implementation of some of the consultants' recommendations that we focus on? So that'll be something that I'll have to wrestle with a bit. I put this here, Ashley gave me this as a chance for people to scan. If you are looking for the information on upcoming meetings, there are 2 meetings that are going to be scheduled, that are scheduled on the council agenda for the 16th. During the work session, I'll share some of the time with the parks team. They'll come in and they're going to give a general presentation that kicks off basically finalizing the plan. And then they'll have a few public outreach sessions that same week. This will be a chance for you as council to hear what the last stage of work is to be done. And then eventually you will receive the final document in February, March as a part of your process to consider its adoption and amendment to the comprehensive plan. And then there's a community meeting on December 17th at Carver. So this is a chance for you, if anyone, while this is up on the screen, can scan it and get the information that has been prepared in advance of these meetings. So when we go deeper in the infrastructure and go away from parks, then you start to think about some of the things that we've already been talking about. So what I'm doing here is pointing out to you that there are a number of things that we've already identified numbers for, and these are identified in the CIP, the proposed CIP at this time. And there are a couple of things that we don't have numbers for, so those are things that we're continuing to work on.
So the traffic signal replacement, is that just a general kind of to keep them modernized type of thing, or is it?
Total replacement. It's updating outdated equipment, so pole and all. So some of these, $7 million is the ongoing project. This is just routine work that needs to be done, has been probably backlogged for a little bit, and now we're working towards truly strategizing over a 5-year plan. How do we address the most serious of them? So that's what that $7 million is that we have accounted for. The sidewalk priorities, $4.7 million, makes up the work that Ben Chambers did in identifying what the 3 tiers of sidewalk priorities are and what the costs associated with them being in those 3 different phases. Over 5 years, that's what it would take to deliver those items to whatever degree is identified on that list.
All 3 tiers, or just?
All 3 tiers, but not to completion. It's just to what he proposed in that presentation. Some items would get designs and that's it, whereas some would actually get scopes that would go to what it would truly cost, and then others would actually be completed. So it's a beginning of the delivery of all 3 phases, but it does not bring all 3 to completion. The downtown mall, I put a plus or minus $4 million because we know that the tree work itself is roughly half of that. We have added $315,000 for FY26, but nothing for the out years, but we know we're going to have to go back to that. What we're trying to determine right now is, do we add any more for the out years beyond 26, or do we wait until FY26 to add it, because we're giving the team a little more time to figure out what they think the prioritization schedule might look like. Long-term management and maintenance is still a question. That is something that I am wrangling with as I work towards getting to the final stages of the ARP plans and how to use those, as I have just recently shared with you all, as what I'm recommending and what I'll bring forward at the next meeting. And then the fact that we have not identified anything in regards to just making amenity improvements to the downtown mall from the work that came out of the study, the group that worked for a year. We still need to put a number there for what is it that we want to try to do to improve the mall, period, just because it exists and we should be doing something beyond the trees, which we already knew about, and beyond basic maintenance, because it's there and we should take care of it. And then the last item is the urgent infrastructure. I shared as a part of our earlier conversations that I was committed to making sure that I would be able to bring forward a recommendation for some funds to be spent in this area of taking away some of the problem area projects, specifically looking at Elliott and going into a couple of other areas. The to be determined is the actual amount. I have sourced it at this moment. I'll be asking you to consider pulling from the surplus, the anticipated surplus, which is no longer anticipated. You'll hear that soon. But the plan would be to pull from that and use those funds to move some of those projects forward. So the question would be which projects, and that's what the staff is working to finalize right now. Internal operations, these are just things that cost us money right now. We have a team working in the parking space to help us figure out what are some additional work that needs to be done in that regard, so I don't have a cost associated with that. We know the trash collection RFP was of interest last year, and the fact that there is some subsidization of trash collection. We have to get this RFP done so that we can get an updated cost, and then we'll be able to bring forward some opinion as to what that actually looks like with new numbers. That could cause a different consideration on your part, so we're leaving room for that. And then there have been multiple requests for software acquisition that we deem to be all important. Everything on this list, those three, Granicus, SAP migration, and OpenGov, are all positive things. But we're still working through figuring some things out, but they all come at six-figure price tags, each one of them at a minimum. And those are the cost of doing business. So those are things that we know that we're going to have to make fit into a budget, and we have not solidified what that cost is yet, but we're hearing as each budget presentation comes, wherever there is a use of software, we're finding that all of them have increased costs that are a bit higher than they have been in the past couple of years. And then I added this slide here just to point out that this is how I look at what decisions are available to be made versus decisions that are already made. The first 5 bullets, in my opinion, are decisions that you've already made. Affordable housing is a commitment, therefore I'm going to always have to look at every affordable housing opportunity as something that requires attention and to find space and to figure out a way to help you get it if that's what you choose to do. Carlton Mobile Home Park acquisition, we've acquired it. Now we got to pay for it, and then we got to do something with it. So there's going to be continued work and continued interest on the city's part as to what becomes of that project. So we're in it for the long haul. The Water Street Parking Garage lease renewal came at a very, very expensive price tag to us. We have a negotiated new deal. It isn't the best deal in the world, but at least we know, and it's something that we can anticipate what the added costs are. So now that decision has been made. Citywide climate action is continued work that I'm making sure that the team is doing, because we need to have all departments prioritizing what are they doing in that space. But the CAT fleet conversion is called out specifically because it's the most expensive aspect of all of this. And that's something that, again, acknowledge at this point, decision has been made. So therefore we have to find a way to pay for it. And then the sidewalk priorities is just there because, again, sidewalks, my favorite subject. But I'm now looking at adding 4 additional items just based on where we have arrived at this moment. Managing and maintaining the downtown mall is not an expensive venture. We now know that with the full overhaul to the tree canopy is going to cost us a lot of money. It's something that's going to have to happen over time. There's a lot more than just that needs to be dealt with. We have identified a number of those things, and now we have to determine to what degree do we start to prioritize paying for them. ADA compliance, as I've indicated, in our CIP, we've added a $2 million a year commitment. I have, at this moment, I'm not convinced that that's enough to really, really demonstrate best effort, which is what I'm trying to achieve on behalf of the city, is that if we were ever to be visited by anyone who was coming to decide whether or not we're going to survive a inquiry and thus a settlement agreement of any kind. I would like to try to get them to not do that by demonstrating best effort, and I don't know that $2 million a year is going to cut that. So we'll have to see how do we come back and revisit that later, but right now where we are is that's what's been worked into the CIP. Investment in parks and recreation, we all recognize the importance of parks. It is the equalizer across the city for everyone, and for us, it is something that we have not really, I would say, comprehensively prioritized, and that was why the Parks Master Plan was important as one of those deliverables that we needed to bring forward. And I am not a fan and have not been a fan and have communicated that we don't get plans and put them on shelves. We should get those plans and start to work them. So now we have to figure that out. And lastly, addressing homelessness is going to be a very interesting, challenging, and expensive venture. And it is something that we're going to have to commit to, as I have already recommended and will officially formalize that going forward. But these are all things that I then would shift by the actions of this budget into decisions made. Therefore, the list gets harder and harder to accept additions when we have to figure out how to pay for all of it. So again, pointing out that this is what punching above one's weight class looks like when you can fill up a slide. So, next budget brief is on December 16th, and I am happy to take any questions if you have any.
So, what do you see as, the biggest challenge? Is it, I know that you said at the last meeting, you want to do a lot without raising the tax.
You heard me. That
Yes.
was nice.
Yes, sir.
I like hearing that. You heard me. I'm not convinced, but I said it because I would love to make that
Yeah.
possible. But that's the challenge. But I'll say that, I mean, that's a pretty significant list. I mean, that's an exceptional list, in my opinion, of how many things are on that list that are associated with decisions having been made, thus significant investments, committed investments for everything that's on that list. That's a lot.
So, if you could just spend a moment to talk about the ADA compliance. So we're a really old
Yep.
city,
We are.
I know now many sidewalks are just been there for decades before probably, things. And so are we required to update? How does it work for us? I'm just using that as an example. It could
Yeah.
be curb ramps and everything, so.
So the ADA is law, therefore it's not optional. And when the ADA was considered, it was a big, giant public debate, and Congress spent a lot of time back and forth on it because it was basically going to be a huge expense to all communities around the country. And that's true. What the ADA being passed as law has meant and what it was supposed to mean up until now, and it's always up until you get visited by the folks who hit you, is you have plenty of time to do something once the law was passed, because that was the shot across the bow of, all right, so this is the law of the land. ADA compliance is a requirement. It's an expectation. Yes, you're a city that's been around since 1762. Okay, but we passed it in the 80s. So we were supposed to commit and get to work and make some things happen. And I think the reality is that what we're seeing is when the DOJ comes and they end up with settlement agreements with communities, it's because they have not been able to demonstrate best effort. And that's really what they're looking for. They're not looking for perfection. They are looking for best effort. But they don't tell you what best effort is, because that's how the federal government works. So they want you to really show that you have to be able to speak to the idea of, we came up with a transition plan, which is required. So we have that, we'll have a new one. And then you have to demonstrate your best effort by trying to implement that plan as quickly as possible. Because what we see the settlements actually dictating is they will require that your budget be set at a new number that they give you, and they'll give you a new timeline, which is always going to be less than the timeline that you're working under. And then basically what it does is it changes that list of what your decisions are, because it's going to require that more money be spent on that single topic for that period of time to ensure that you get to compliance or to their level of desire of compliance as soon as possible. So what we have seen is sometimes there's $20 million settlements, $100 million settlements, and they give you 5, 10-year windows to get them done. I've made a 5-year commitment as a proposal to you all just now. I do not believe that would be deemed acceptable.
5 years at $2 million a year.
I suspect that if we were in hot water today, that'd be not even close to what
This
the
is also
settlement
after
number is.
35 years of not
Correct.
doing anything.
Yeah.
And that's really what was working against us.
Well, assuming that were to happen, we need to do the right thing, obviously.
Sure.
Now, and I think we're finally, like you talking about, a culture of compliance is
Yeah.
where it starts.
Right. And we're not arguing that we are already there demonstrating best effort. I've been a champion of owning the problem for what it is. It's how do we make sure that, one, we have had the right capacity, therefore manpower to get these things done. We have put together a solid plan that we are ready to implement and consistently work on, and then that we have the resources to do exactly what we set out to do. All I'm worried about is, as I see, and our deputy who is spending a lot of time in this space, when we come across a settlement, we're both looking at what those settlements are saying, and they're not good. It's a lot of money that they're requiring to be dedicated in those moments.
So I guess if that were to happen, we would probably be looking at some sort of special bond issue for that, right?
I would say it's possible if,
I mean, that would be
because what
something-
it would mean is that you would have to make different decisions. If there were new items that are being brought forward, you would either say, no, we can't because we can't make that fit, or you would have to do something in creating additional revenue to make it possible to do all of it.
Yeah.
It gets harder, that's all. It gets harder. So the reference to culture of compliance is also for me to ensure that I share with the full team, this is everyone's responsibility. I am working to demonstrate that we are trying our best and we're putting forth a committed effort. And while we can't turn this tide overnight because it is too much, what we can do is we can really, really wrap our arms around what does good, solid work look like, what is a great process around that, and let's check our work and make sure that we can speak to we're getting these things done and we're checking things off the list. That's what I'd like to be able to see. In our prior transition plan, I can't say that we did that. We had a plan and we looked at it and we every now and again used it, and we had a committee that came together and worked on it from time to time, but it wasn't as structured as what I'm talking about today. So.
Any other questions or comments on this? Anything down here, Michael or Natalie?
In regards to managing and maintaining the downtown mall, has there been any serious conversation or consideration around the creation of something like a business improvement district in order to fund those improvements on a long-term, time horizon?
It has come up, but I won't say that we have studied it to figure out how much it could generate, how it might work. But I think it's one of those things that regardless of what the city contribution that I might bring forward as a recommendation, it won't be enough. So there will be a need for more, and that probably would be exactly where we would go next. But to date, we have not done that.
Yeah, I think obviously it just may be necessary in order to get to the level of investment people may want.
Right.
How would we take that further?
For the consideration of a business investment,
Yeah.
I would say that that would be a part of an assignment that I would probably give to our economic development director to begin, and then we would bring in probably Friends of Seaville Downtown to socialize it, and then probably have to do a series of conversations with the business owners and property owners directly.
Yeah, I would suggest on top of every other thing you have going on that be something we start.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reality is that they probably will anticipate it when we're able to demonstrate what it is that we will commit to it, because it won't be enough. The work of the committee, I sat through every committee meeting for a whole year. There's a lot of stuff on that list of all the various things that we would like to do to the mall. Some of them are basic maintenance and some of those are new improvements. It's 50 years old almost. there's some additional things that we want today that we didn't think about then or didn't prioritize then. Lighting, for example, is not cheap for what it is that we're talking about on all the cross streets and things like that. When you put that in, you got to maintain that. So that's why I think it becomes a challenge for us being able to say that we will foot the bill entirely and that a business improvement district might be of consideration.
Okay.
Okay?
All right, thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Any other questions? Is that it, Sam? So we ready to go to closed session, or we had other
Yes,
items?
that's it.
Okay, thank you.
Pursuant to Section 2.2-3712 of the Virginia Code, I move that the City Council close this open meeting and convene in a closed session as authorized by the Virginia Freedom of Information Act as follows. 1, under Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A7, for consultation with legal counsel pertaining to actual litigation, where such consultation in open meeting would adversely affect the litigating posture of the public body.
Second?
Second, can we vote, please? Okay. The motion passes 5-0. We're now in closed session. We will return at approximately 6:30 for our regular business meeting. Thank you very much.